3 suitcases. 3 bags were discovered on December 20th, 1976, along Interstate 80 in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, near the Lehigh River. There was a young woman whose remains were in the suitcases. It was discovered by investigators that she had been beaten and strangled. They regrettably also found out that the woman was 9 months pregnant. Her unborn child did not survive. It's thought that bags had been tossed from a car that was heading west. One of the luggage landed on the riverside, and the other 2 fell into the woods. To reduce the likelihood that it would be discovered, the offender most likely intended to toss it into the river. The girl was introduced as Beth Doe because she was pregnant. She weighed 145 pounds and stood about 5 feet tall. It was assumed that Beth Doe, who had dark brown hair, was white and had been born in Europe before relocating to the U.S. She was not identified even after having her teeth inspected, fingerprints taken, and missing people reports from Canada and the United States checked. 2 reconstructions were made public by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2015. The Pennsylvania State Police revealed in September 2019 that Beth Doe might be Madeline Cruz. In 1974, Madeline Cruz fled her home and her family. She phoned a friend in 1976 to beg for money because she was expecting a child. Though Madeline would have fit the description and time frame, investigators discovered her to be in good health. But despite the resurgence of interest in the case, Evelyn Cologne's identity as Beth Doe was discovered. Evelyn Cologne was discovered to be Beth Doe. She was 15 years old and originally from Puerto Rico. She shared a Jersey City flat with 19-year-old Luis Sierra in 1970. When Evelyn's mother Soup arrived, Evelyn had vanished when she had called her one day. Luis wrote to her family to let them know she had given birth and to not worry. If she needed anything, she would get in touch with them. Since Evelyn's family believes she was secure with Luis and that she intentionally broke off communication, they never filed a missing persons report. Additionally, on March 31, 2021, Luis was questioned by investigators who visited his residence. He eventually amended his statement after initially claiming he was unaware of Evelyn Cologne's identity. When the investigators decided they had enough, they made the arrest. As of right now, he is being held without bond. If you're fascinated by true crime and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next case. Adam Brundage. Quakertown-born Adam Brundage, 26, was a father of 2 children. His father had suddenly gone away, leaving him with a sizable inheritance. He used the funds to purchase a home. He shared a residence with Damon Smoot. It was just a few months before Adam and Damon purchased the home. Adam's mother and ex-girlfriend became concerned in October 2004 when he stopped returning her calls and was listed as missing. A peculiarity was that Damon, Adam's flatmate, continued to live in Adam's home by himself and continued to drive Adam's most valuable vehicle, a 1997 Mercury Cougar. Damon said to Adam's mother that Adam had given him everything. Damon would provide a different account of what happened to Adam every time the police or someone else questioned him about it. He said that Adam moved to Iowa due to unpaid child support. Then he said that Adam had fled to Wisconsin in order to avoid an arrest warrant. After that, the plot would alter a few more times. Damon did not decide to notify the police what had transpired until this year, in 2020. He consented to enter a guilty plea on January 9th and gave the police full information. He confessed to them his envy of Adam and everything he owned. Adam called Damon on October 4th, 2004, requesting supplies. There was a repair he needed to do in the house. After telling Adam to meet him at work, Damon and Adam got into a heated altercation. After getting a baseball bat out of his car, Damon gave Adam a headlock. Adam lost consciousness and began convulsing. Damon then covered Adam's lips and nose with his fingers until his breathing ceased. Damon revealed to the authorities Adam's burial place. The retrieval of the remains took almost a day. The police are certain that they would never have located Adam if Damon hadn't told them. For an unrelated offense, Damon was already serving a 10-year term. When he is 62 years old, he will be eligible for release. Because Damon was using Adam's automobile and residing in his home as though he owned it, essentially living Adam's life, Adam's mother, Donna Brundage, claims she was aware from the beginning that it was Damon. District Attorney Matthew Weintraub stated, "I'm happy to say it's been returned to his family for a proper burial." Adam, on the other hand, lived for 15 years without a funeral or a grave monument. Moving on to the next case. Carole Multesi. In 2020, 41-year-old David Fontana and 24-year-old Carole Multesi first met in a Milan hotel room. Carole had recruited Fontana, a food blogger, banker, and photography aficionado, to take some provocative pictures of her for her website. Under the alias Charlotte Angie, she was an OnlyFans creator who used her platform to sell provocative photos and sexual videos. Fontana had already been married when they met. However, he separated from his wife and started dating Carole in the months after their photo session, which he subsequently referred to as an open relationship. The 26-year-old was then killed by Fontana in January 2022, while they were meant to be filming for Carole's OnlyFans. Before severing her throat with a knife, he gave her 13 blows to the head with a hammer. Fontana dismembered Carole's remains after the murder. After trying to burn them at first, he bought a chest freezer to preserve the remainder in. Fontana's neighbors reported that in the weeks after the murder, which remained unsolved for several months, he was entirely normal. When Carole did not show up at a lap dance club in March, Fontana filed a missing persons report, but for weeks prior, she had been pretending to be the 26-year-old, paying her rent, answering her texts, and posting on social media. Fontana realized he had to dispose of the body when he learned that Carole's body was being sought after by the police. He packed the remains into black plastic bags and drove out into the countryside in Carole's Fiat 500, tossing the bundles off a far mountain road. But in late March, despite Fontana's best efforts to hide his crime, someone happened to notice one of Carole's hands. But because of the burns on her face, the body could not be instantly identified. Carole, fortunately, had a ton of eye-catching tattoos. 11 of them were described by the authorities, with tattoos on her inner thighs that were inverted versus, the phrase wanderlust on her upper body, and the half-visible term elegance down her back. Soon after, a journalist started investigating Carole's life and history after receiving information regarding the identification of the dead. When he tried to message the 26-year-old on WhatsApp, he got a response right away that said, "A lot of people have told me about that girl." Thankfully, she can reply to messages on her phone and access internet accounts. Eventually, he gave the paramilitary police in Italy everything he knew. After the victim's body was identified, Fontana came forward to say he knew her, but he denied having anything to do with her disappearance and death. However, the 43-year-old continued to arouse suspicions in the eyes of the authorities, who tracked his travels from January to March and also investigated his residence. The same black trash bags that had been used to cover the body were discovered inside, along with DNA evidence that implicated him. They also discovered the chest freezer. Fontana quickly revised his account. He stated that he had dismembered and hidden her remains after unintentionally killing his lover during consenting intercourse. He was then accused with dismembering, hiding a corpse, and aggravated first-degree killing. The actual nature of the crime was discovered in the summer of 2023 when it was disclosed that Carole had informed Fontana she wanted to break up with him in order to relocate to Verona and be with her 6-year-old kid. Strangely, Fontana, 43, escaped the prosecution's request for a life sentence in spite of the horrifyingly brutal acts he committed, the cold-blooded way he pretended she was still alive, and the fact that he first lied to authorities about her death. Although Fontana was found guilty of murder, The court decided that the crime was not premeditated or extremely brutal. Worrisomely, the judges also said that Carole's killer had felt taken advantage of and that she was young and impulsive. Further elaborating on their conclusion, the judges said that Fontana had been driven to take her own life by, quote, the realization that he had lost the woman he loved and that she had used him. It makes sense that the decision in this instance is viewed as being quite contentious. Carole's family, the attorney for her family, and women in government have all voiced their displeasure over the judge's written words and the sentencing itself. If people don't understand the motivation behind the sentence, then that's certainly not my problem, stated Giuseppe Fazio, the senior judge in the case, adding that he would have imposed the same penalty even if the defendant had been a nun. Fontana received a 30-year prison sentence for this vicious and depraved crime. Cynthia Anderson. James Rabbit sensed something was wrong from the moment he walked into his office on August 4, 1981. The air conditioning and lights were on, the radio was playing, and his desk, along with the other attorneys in his office, was ready for the next day. However, Cynthia Jane Anderson, also known as Cindy, his 20-year-old legal secretary, was nowhere to be found. Cindy's family said she was a kind and intelligent young lady. Along with the rest of her family, she was a devoted Christian fundamentalist who lived and worked in Ohio. Although she was known to like her work at the East Manhattan Boulevard legal offices of James Rabbit and Jay Feldstein, she did had plans to leave in 2 weeks to attend Bible college with her new partner. Her abrupt, unexplained absence was therefore regarded as unusual and out of character. Cindy didn't leave any notes to inform her employers that she was just leaving or running errands the morning she disappeared from her job. Her keys and handbag were missing, but her automobile was still in the same position in the parking lot, according to what the authorities found out. Her romance novel, which was open on her desk, was another item she had forgotten. Upon reviewing Cindy's finances, investigators found that she'd left a substantial sum of money behind in her account. Since her disappearance, neither her social security number nor her bank accounts have been used. After talking to her parents, Cindy's father observed that, while it might be because she has a new boyfriend, Cindy has been paying close attention to her appearance lately. Additionally, he mentioned that she had been missing breakfast most mornings. These were not inherently alarming, even though they might be interpreted as odds. But more alarming information was on the verge of being revealed. Law enforcement conducted inquiries and found a number of odd and unsettling bits of information. First of all, they discovered that Cindy had been experiencing a recurrent nightmare for the previous year in which a man abducted and attacked her. In addition to this, she had been receiving strange calls at work, which worried her a lot. Authorities were informed by a coworker at her place of employment that the 20-year-old had received an upsetting phone call the day before she vanished. Cindy clarified that this wasn't the only troubling call she'd gotten when asked what was wrong. She received 2 calls from the unidentified caller while her coworker was there. An emergency buzzer had been set at Cindy's desk by her employees earlier that year, and because of the call she was getting and the nightmares she was having, she had become very meticulous about making sure the office door was closed at all times. The investigators found the crime scene to be perplexing. There was no forced entrance, and the office did not exhibit any symptoms of commotion, despite the fact that they had some alarming information to go off. After 10 a.m., no calls were returned, indicating that Cindy may have experienced anything at this time. An unidentified man wrote, "I love you, Cindy" by G.W. on a wall close to her place of employment, providing another clue in the case. A decade prior to disappearing, the 20-year-old had spotted the writing. Before it was covered up, it was there for 6 months. However, it returned a few weeks later. It makes sense that Cindy would have been deeply troubled by this. When the police investigated and cleared numerous mails with the initials GW, including a building maintenance worker, it was first unclear if the writing had anything to do with her abduction. Nevertheless, the author has subsequently been discovered, and is thought to be unrelated to Cindy's disappearance. He allegedly composed the note for Cindy, a different woman. Then, in September 1981, a disturbing anonymous tip led law enforcement to believe Cindy was being held against her will. The caller, who was frightened and wouldn't provide her name, informed the authorities that the 20-year-old was being held in a White House's basement and that the same family owned 2 adjacent houses. Cindy was allegedly being held captive by their son, who had stayed behind while the family was on vacation. When the investigator on the other end pushed the caller for more details, she hung up and refused to provide an address. She did return the call after a few months, but when another law enforcement officer tried to listen in on the conversation, she hung up again. Since then, the anonymous tipper has not returned calls, and it is unclear whether or not the tip was legitimate. It appears that the houses she mentioned were never found by the authorities. Just one more enigmatic call in an already excessively lengthy string of them. The reports that Cindy's romance novel was left open at a page when an abduction was occurring in the plot are among the most talked about aspects of this case. It seems to be the sole violent confrontation in the novel. While some believe that this is a clue that was purposefully left out, others have questioned how plausible it is that Cindy simply happened to be on that page on the day that she disappeared. The likelihood that she turned the right page before being kidnapped is substantially lower. Nobody can investigate for themselves what this could mean because the book has never been mentioned in reports. Some web sleuths think it's a clue left by an abduction, while many others think it's just a red herring. In Cindy's case, there have been a number of suspects throughout the years, and none of them have ever been formally ruled out. Though they have consistently denied being connected to this crime, 2 convicted murderers, Anthony and Nathaniel Cook, who killed 9 people between them in Ohio between the years of 1988 and 1989, have long been suspected of being involved. It is also believed that another convicted murderer, who has not been identified and is incarcerated in Ohio, was engaged in the case. But there has never been any solid evidence linking this individual to Cindy. The theory involving Richard Neller, a lawyer at the business Cindy worked for, is among the more convincing ones. He represented Jose Rodriguez Jr., a drug dealer. The police conjectured that Cindy might have heard the 2 talking about Jose's illegal conduct and was silenced as a result. During Jose's 1995 trial, an informant gave testimony stating that he had admitted to killing the 20-year-olds. Nevertheless, the testimony was found to be untrustworthy. Jose and Richard were later found guilty of narcotics offenses and sentenced to prison. It should be mentioned that 9 individuals were charged with drug trafficking not long after Cindy vanished. Authorities have suspicions that 1 or more of them may have knowledge regarding the disappearance. However, no fresh leads in the case have surfaced as of yet. There isn't much conjecture beyond these theories. The majority of fans of real crime speculate that Cindy might have departed on her own initiative. They came at this conclusion by pointing out that the 20-year-old purposefully left the book behind, that there were no evidence of a struggle, and that the office doors were shut that morning. Although some people find solace in this belief, others have challenged it. They draw attention to the fact that her bank account remained unopened, and she seemed to have very little to no money on her person. She would need contacts to obtain a new social security number and a respectable sum of money if she fled to start afresh. The only other hypothesis that has been put up in Cindy's case is that she had an undiscovered mental disorder and was highly paranoid. Many on the internet have questioned if she was the victim of her own anxiety and potential illness, or if she actually received abusive phone calls. Cindy's parents have never moved or had their phone numbers changed. Her father passed away in 2008, 25 years after her mother in 1983. Sydney would be 69 years old if she were still living. Moving on to the next case. Dorothy Forstein. Liddell provides information about Dorothy Cooper's early life and was born in 1909 as Dorothy Forstein. She married Jules Forstein, her childhood sweetheart, in 1942. 2 years prior, He had become a widower and the single parent of 2 young girls. Molly, his wife, passed away during childbirth. Jules was consequently left to raise Myrna and Marcy by himself. After they were married, Dorothy gave birth to Edward, their son, who would become her only child. Friends and neighbors spoke to Dorothy as a cheerful, gregarious woman who loved her family, and their marriage was described as happy. When the two first started dating, Jules worked as a clerk for the municipal council until being appointed to magistrate in 1943. Dorothy and Jules moved into a 3-story house on North Franklin Street in Philadelphia after getting married. In order to run errands, 36-year-old Dorothy left the kids with a neighbor on January 25, 1945. That night, she came home to find that someone had broken into her house. When Dorothy knocked the telephone off its base during the battle, the live operator on the other end of the line became worried by what she was hearing from Dorothy's end and promptly called the authorities. At the sound of the police sirens, the unidentified attacker ran away, leaving Dorothy barely alive. She had been beaten so severely that she had fractures to her jaw, nose, and concussion in addition to a shattered shoulder. Thankfully, Dorothy survived the attack and fully recovered. However, she was unable to identify or even describe her attacker when questioned by authorities, saying, "Detectives, someone jumped out at me. I failed to recognize who it was. He struck me repeatedly." Authorities considered it highly unusual because nothing had been taken from the house and that there were no indications of forced entry. After talking to nearby residents, police learned that they had another witness, but this time she was unable to name or describe the attacker. The neighbor gave her account of seeing someone either accompanying Mrs. Forstein or trailing close behind as she made her way to the front door. The neighbor, however, didn't pay much attention because she didn't find it noteworthy. Only after Dorothy's attack became widely publicized did the witness start to think that what she had witnessed might be significant. Following the events of that evening, the 36-year-old mother of 3 turned inward and withdrawn. She was extremely sensitive to abrupt noises, even the slightest ones, and she always made sure that the house's windows and doors were secured at night. Although it took a few years for Dorothy to start looking like her former self, more tragedy was regrettably on the horizon. Jules departed from home on October 18, 1949, to go to a political banquet. Myrna, the couple's eldest daughter, who is currently 19 years old, also went to spend the night at a friend's house. Dorothy gave a buddy a call at about 9 o'clock at night to set up a shopping appointment for the next day. Reportedly, Jules called Dorothy that evening, but accounts differ. Current reports claim that he spoke with his wife on the phone from 5 to 6 p.m. He was preparing to leave his office and go to the dinners at this point. Older newspaper cuttings from 1949, however, state that he called her at approximately 10 p.m., which is almost 1 hour before he got home. Nonetheless, the papers do concur that when he called, Dorothy appeared to be doing just great and in high spirits. Jules was shocked to see Marcy and Edward by themselves in a bedroom when he got home at around 11 o'clock at night. The two were snuggled close together, clearly terrified as they sobbed, "Mommy's gone." Startled by their words, Jules went through the house trying to find his wife. He then called a few of Dorothy's acquaintances to try to find her, but nobody had seen or heard from her that night save the person she had made plans with. Jules called the local police captain and explained the issue, fearing for his wife's safety. A search team was mobilized in a matter of hours. The surrounding area and beyond were thoroughly searched. Detectives shared Dorothy's account with law enforcement agencies in 8 eastern states as they scoured motels, morgues, and mental health facilities nationwide for any evidence of the 40-year-old, but they were never successful. The sole lead for law enforcement came from 9-year-old Marcy, who said she had been awakened in the middle of the night by a noise. Marcy had left her room and gone into the hallway about 15 minutes before Jules got home. It was then that she saw a middle-aged man, roughly her father's age, come up the stairs and go into her mother's bedroom. She reported to the police that her mother appeared ill after seeing her unconscious on the ground. The man picked up Dorothy and threw her over his shoulder a few moments later. The 40-year-old remained still, and the man with the brown peaked cap carried her downstairs. The man gave Marcy a pat on the head and said, "Go back to sleep, little one." When she asked what he was doing, "Your mother is doing well." Marcy remembered that this was the man's first time seeing him. Investigators were skeptical of this account at first because they knew that toddlers were prone to having irrational and hyperactive imaginations. However, it was established that the young child seemed to be telling the truth after Marcy saw a psychiatrist. Notably, no objects were removed from the scene in either of the kidnapping or assault incidents, ruling out robbery as a motive. There were never any indications of forced entry, and no odd prints were discovered within the house. Actually, it's thought that the man who took Dorothy shut the front door behind him as he left. The case is made even more strange by these details. In Dorothy's case, there aren't many theories. Investigators quickly acknowledged that, even in the early days following the 40-year-old's disappearance, they had no clues. Newspaper articles from 1949 claim that the authorities speculated that she might have suffered from amnesia, but they don't explain why. A prominent theory surrounding Dorothy's case is that she was attacked and subsequently kidnapped by an individual harboring resentment towards her spouse, Jules. Morris Ameth has been identified as a potential suspect. A textile seller claims that 2 police officers beat him for 20 minutes after removing him from a violent throng. He was fined $10 and accused of multiple infractions. Subsequently, he brought charges of assault and battery against the police officers who had allegedly attacked him. However, Jules, who at the time was a magistrate, dismissed them. But there was never any proof linking Ameth to the location of the kidnapping or the assault. According to a different allegation, Jules bribed someone to hurt his wife. The theory put forth by armchair detectives is that Dorothy was supposed to die in the initial attacks, but she survived because of a lucky break. A hired hitman was therefore paid to go back to the scene and do the job. It has been noted, nevertheless, that if Dorothy had just vanished, Jules would have known how long it would take him to declare her dead or gain access to any of her belongings. It would have been preferable for him had his wife's body been discovered if this strategy was going to work. It has also been proposed that Dorothy may have staged her disappearance to avoid living in constant fear, possibly as a result of financial difficulties. Some have speculated that she left her kids behind to avoid being charged with kidnapping if she was found, or perhaps she thought she had a better chance of vanishing if she traveled alone. In 2003, an American hauntings blogger talked about Dorothy's case. However, a kind and non-threatening letter was sent to them after they posted their section by a lawyer representing the Forstein family, requesting that the post be taken down. These demands reportedly came from other blogs and media sites that had covered the subject at this time. The Forstein family's objection to a further investigation into the case is not apparent. Even while it might be their intention to avoid reopening previous wounds, this seems like an odd course of action. Jules offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in the wake of the disappearance, but he later withdrew this money because he needed it. It's interesting to note that Jules left his children a $4,906 fortune when he passed away in 1956. That is the equivalent of about $50,000 in modern currency. In the meanwhile, when Dorothy vanished in 1949, her assets were estimated to be worth $9,946, or little more than $125,000 today. Securities discovered in her security deposit box soon after her disappearance constituted the majority of her assets. Internet detectives have speculated as to whether Dorothy's disappearance was related to her assets or the couple's financial strain at the time of her abduction. Dorothy was pronounced legally dead a year after Jules passed away. Myrna, her oldest stepdaughter, submitted a petition, which served as the foundation for the judge's ruling. Nevertheless, the case is still open. Moving on to the next case. Kenneth and Barbara Martin. In Portland, Oregon, in 1958, Kenneth and Barbara Martin resided with their 3 daughters, Barbie, Virginia, and Susan. Donald, their 28-year-old son, was stationed with the Navy in New York. In search of a Christmas tree, Kenneth and Barbara loaded up their 3 daughters into their red Ford station wagon on December 7, 1958, and drove to Columbia Gorge. People who knew the family noted that Kenneth disliked driving at night, therefore it seemed strange that he departed so late on a chilly winter's day. They departed at around 1 in the afternoon. The family had no intention of going back to their house. Kenneth was supposed to work at Heckle's Electric Home Service Company on December 9th, but he did not show up. Kenneth's supervisor then reported the family missing. When the Martins' home was searched by the police, they discovered that nothing had been tampered with. There was a load of laundry in the washing machine, dishes in the drying rack to drain, and Kenneth's Santa Claus suit from the night before spread out. A petrol station employee saw the family stop at his station to buy 5 gallons of petrol during their initial investigation. The petrol station was located 40 miles east of Portland near Cascade Locks. A credit card bill verifying the sighting was delivered to the Martin family's residence 2 weeks later. A waitress at Hood River's Paradise snack bar called Clara reported serving the family shortly after this sighting at approximately 5 o'clock in the evening. The waitress said that the family left for the Dales after their supper. The family was spotted by multiple drivers in Washington state along the north bank of the Columbia River. In the Dales, a switcher noticed tire tracks that led off a precipice in February 1959. The footprints were identified by the police as belonging to the Martin family's vehicle. The officers also examined paint chips that they had discovered at the scene. The paint was found to match the model of Martin's family car. Sonar was used to scour the river, but nothing indicated the presence of the car. 3 months later, on May 1, 1959, something substantial was hooked onto the anchor of a river drilling rig near the tire tracks. But the object moved away from the anchor before it could be taken out and examined. A fisherman and his spouse reported spotting what they thought to be 2 dead floating in the river close to Cascade Locks the next day. Susan's body was discovered by the police on May 3rd, close to Camus, Washington, on the north bank of the Columbia River. Virginia's body would be discovered the following day close to Bonneville Dam. The Multnomah County medical examiner conducted an autopsy on both girls. A technician claimed to have observed what seemed to be bullet holes in their skulls. The medical examiner's report states that drowning was the cause of death because no such injuries were discovered. The cause of death was ruled to be between 6 and 7 p.m. after autopsies revealed that both girls had consumed hamburgers and fries. The waitress at the Paradise snack bar had spotted the family around 5 p.m. Susan's outfit also had metal traces on it. Sheriff Rupert Gilmeth came to the conclusion that the oil rig had flipped over the Martin family vehicle, and that when it had done so, it had unlocked one of the car's doors, letting the bodies of Susan and Virginia escape to the surface. Once more, sonar and divers were used to search the river in an attempt to locate the automobile and the remaining family members, but to no avail. The remains of Barbara, and Kenneth were never discovered. While some police officers thought Martin's car had driven off the cliff by accident, others suspected foul play. A stolen white Chevrolet with Cascade locks was discovered by the police on December 9th, the day the Martin family was reported missing. The car was registered in Venice, California, which is near Los Angeles. Roy Light and an additional man who remained nameless were taken into custody the next day in relation to the pilfered car. The 2 individuals had previously been arrested and served time for separate offenses. Both males had visited the Paradise snack bar on the same day, and at the same time as the Martin family, it was later discovered. Additionally, the waitress mentioned that the 2 guys had departed at the same time as the Martin family. Nevertheless, the authorities did not follow up on this tip. A .38 Colt Commander handgun was discovered a few days later not far from the location of the pilfered Chevrolet. The gun appeared to have been used to strike someone because it had dried blood on it. The Mayer and Frank retail shop was identified by the serial number of the rifle. Later on, it was discovered that the gun was one of the many goods that Donald, Kenneth's son, was accused of stealing while he was employed at the Mayer and Frank department store. It was reported that Donald's interactions with his family were tense. Donald stayed in New York and suspiciously never took part in any of the searches conducted for his family. A woman's glove was discovered on December 28, 1958, not far from the location of the stolen Chevrolet. The gloves looked just like the ones Barbara used to wear, according to a family friend. It was never established, though, whether or not she truly owned the gloves. Although there was never enough proof to link Donald to his family's abduction, he was nevertheless thought to be a suspect. Multnomah County speculated that the family's disappearance may have been the result of foul play. The remains of Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbary have never been located, despite no more searches being done. Moving on to the next case. Larry and Amanda McClure. Early in 2019, 31-year-old Amanda McClure and her 38-year-old partner, John McGuire, a father of 5, were residing in Owatonna, Minnesota. Amanda decided that she and John should visit Sky-Gusty, West Virginia, since she had lately gotten in touch with her estranged biological father, so they hopped in their car and drove off. The two did not, however, reach Indiana before their car broke down. Amanda contacted her 55-year-old father, Larry McClure, and requested that he come get them. He consented and brought Amanda Choudhury, Amanda's 32-year-old sister, along. Larry had been incarcerated for 17.5 years for the first-degree sexual assault of a minor. He was only recently released from prison. When Amanda was 9 years old and Anna was 10, their father sexually assaulted one of Larry's children or another member of the family. After his release, he was contacted by both of his daughters. Anna had stated that she had only lived with Larry for a short time before their departure to pick up Amanda and John from Indiana. The group made the decision to buy supplies in Sky-Gusty so they could make their own crystal meth, but instead of following a precise recipe, they chose to wing it when trying to create the medication. But the material didn't crystallize the way they had anticipated, so they deemed the batch to be defective. John came to the conclusion that he and Amanda should make a permanent move within the course of the following few days. He declared his love for her and his desire to wed her. However, Amanda's father was not happy to hear this information. Anna said that Larry became silent furious. He frequently pulled his youngest daughter into a corner and had quiet, private chats with her in the days that followed. Later on, Anna would claim that she didn't know what they were discussing and that she hadn't asked. Based on the events that followed, it appeared likely that Larry was gradually turning Amanda against her partner. The party enjoyed a bottle of wine, some steak and potatoes, and a fun day together on Valentine's Day. However, when a little trust game was played, things became worse. John's legs are being tied to a kitchen chair in this situation. Anna said, "I don't know when Larry sat down," describing the apparent moment of change in everything. "I'll never be able to adequately explain that smile." As he stooped over and tried to untie himself, John seemed to sense this abrupt change in the air. But just as he was about to finish, Amanda snatched the wine bottle from the table and smashed it over his head, knocking the glass over. Larry then restrained John's arms. After that, John, who was 38 years old, endured what can only be described as torture. The group badgered him mercilessly, Larry leading the charge and wanting to know John's real identity. John was forced to refute the father of 5's claim that he was a federal agent and provide his social security number as evidence, but he was powerless to stop them. All 3 of the family members severely assaulted John and interrogated him several times over the course of a few days. After some time, Larry gave Anna the order to inject John with the faulty batch of meth they had made. She placed it into 2 syringes and injected John's carotid artery with each of them. Though she was certain that this would result in his demise, it didn't. In fact, it gave John more energy and encouraged his tenacity. He kept denying all the charges made against him by his family. Ultimately, the family killed John 2 or 3 days following their Valentine's Day dinner. Larry restrained him while Amanda covered his head with a bag, and Anna used a rope to choke him. After John was dead, they buried their victim by digging a shallow grave close to Larry's trailer and covering his body with trash bags. His possessions were thrown into a bonfire. Amanda started what Anna referred to as a relationship with their father after John was killed. Police in West Virginia filed a report alleging it was sexual in nature. After 6 days, the gang started to think that John wasn't quite dead. A paranoid hallucination that was probably brought on by the medications they were doing. After excavating the body and hammering wooden stakes into it, the 3 dismembered John and buried his remains in a side yard. In the hopes of accelerating the rates of decomposition, they threw quicklime on him. It took Amanda and Larry less than 2 months to make the decision to travel to Virginia and exchange vows. Since incestuous marriage was forbidden, they entered a fictitious identity for the bride's father. In her capacity as the couple's witness, Anna was also present. By the time John's family expressed their concerns, it was June 2019. In the hopes that someone had seen him someplace, they posted information about him on social media, asked about, and filed a missing persons report. They didn't seem to know that the 38-year-old and his girlfriend had left town. Amanda persisted in cashing John's Social Security benefits in the meantime. After some time, the family relocated to Kentucky, where Larry was supposed to register as a sexual offender under the law, but he never did. The horrifying tale of the 3 came to an end as a result of his inability to do so. In September 2019, Larry was arrested by Kentucky police for failing to register as a sex offender. When asked about his prior criminal history, he readily acknowledged to being involved in a murder and blamed both of his daughters for it. Asserted that Amanda was the mastermind behind the whole thing and gave thorough explanations of the murder. He also provided the location of John's body to the investigators. Authorities discovered the 30-year-old's remains on September 24th. Additionally, Amanda and Anna were also taken into custody early in October. In exchange for testifying against her family, Amanda was charged with second-degree murder, while Anna and Larry faced first-degree charges. The 3 family members entered guilty pleas to the allegations. Larry wrote, "I just want it over," in a letter around this time. No trial funded by tax dollars. Adding, "All I can do is hope for mercy on this." He continued his pleading for pardon. "I will apologize for my involvement in this." He never revealed the crime's motivation. In August 2020, Larry received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for his involvement in the horrifying crime. Amanda testified about her father's actions and her assumption that he wanted John dead so he could marry her at Amanda's sentencing trial in October of that same year. She claimed that because her father didn't want anybody else around her, he killed her boyfriend. Amanda's adoptive parents, and she discussed how much power the 55-year-old had over her. The court informed her that although the 2 had a history of abuse, it did not absolve her of culpability for what she did, adding, "I don't think you're taking full responsibility for killing John. You're attributing it to your dad. The amount of time you will serve is insufficient to make up for the suffering you have brought about." Amanda received a 40-year prison term. At her sentencing hearing in March 2021, Anna stated that she joined the crime because her father had threatened to harm her and her kids. She was also given a 40-year prison term. Moving on to the next case. Mary Ferns. The 88-year-old Mary Ferns, sometimes known as May, informed her husband early on June 17, 2008, that she was going shopping in Livingston, Scotland's Armandvale shopping centre, which is now called the Centre for New Tights. The 83-year-old Bill remembered that his wife left at around 9:30 a.m., but she never returned. Bill contacted friends and family later that night to find out if anyone had seen the retired nurse. After that, he reported her missing to the local police and prayed that she would soon return, unharmed. But May vanished from sight and was never heard from again. The 88-year-old was last seen on camera, according to detectives, when she was seen strolling down Edinburgh's Princes Street, some 17 miles distant. Although May appeared at ease and content, it is still a mystery why she traveled to Edinburgh in the first place, given there were several shops nearby where she could have bought tights. The 88-year-old's disappearance was deemed strange by the case's investigators, who also mentioned they were still unaware of May's mode of transportation to Edinburgh. Nevertheless, according to some sources, was saw boarding a bus to the capital city of Scotland. Under dense undergrowth, skeletal remains were found by investigators in April 2011 at Craig's Hill, Livingston, near the Almond River. Since January, they had been scouring the area. The remains were partially buried between the Livingston Rugby Club and on Vancouver Avenue, less than a mile from Mary's residence. But on February 23, 2012, it became clear that the remains were not, as investigators had first thought, Mary's. In reality, they belonged to a man who disappeared 15 years prior. In 1996, James Adams, then 58, vanished from sight. Despite his health issues, his death is not thought to be suspicious. Not much further information is known on Mary's case. She was mentioned in a BBC missing persons appeal in 2009, and her daughter sent a help request a year later. But since the bones were found in 2011, there have been no new developments in the case. Mary Ferns, an 88-year-old white woman, is characterized as having green eyes and short gray hair. She has a thin physique, is 5 feet 3 inches tall, and frequently has a brass handle. She had on a brown skirt, brown shoes, and a brown three-quarter jacket on the day she vanished. In addition, she had a brown purse on her arm. Moving on to the next case. Mildred Methany. In 1985, Mildred Methany, then 78 years old, resided in Lake Worth, Florida. She had dementia. Mildred was a nurse by profession. Someone walking by on the evening of April 27th found Mildred suffering from potentially fatal injuries. She had been hit in the head and face, leaving her bloodied and nude. Her dentures were discovered in the soil, and her abandoned clothing was all over the place. After being brought to the hospital, she tragically passed away a few days later from her wounds. Investigators made an effort to compile a timetable. They discovered that Mildred was last seen at her residence in the 1300 block of Crestwood Boulevard in Lake Worth Beach, where she shared a home with her younger sister, Gladys Nolan. Mildred then appeared to stroll off, as she had done previously. She was reported missing at 4:30 p.m. Then, at 10 o'clock at night, a bystander discovered her unconscious on Jupiter's ancient Indian town road, more than 30 miles from her home. Witnesses stated that they saw Mildred pull into a brown Oldsmobile sedan at the Lucerne Avenue and Dixie Highway crossroads. Witnesses informed detectives that the driver identified himself as Mildred's neighbor and promised to assist her in returning home. They were unaware of the precise events that transpired between that time and her discovery. Unfortunately, the case remained unsolved for many years in the absence of credible leads or suspects. That was prior until recently. Using genetic genealogy and the DNA they had taken from Mildred's remains in 1985, investigators were able to identify the suspect. They recognized him as Richard Curtis Lang, age 61, in March 2021. His home is at Boynton Beach, Florida, which is not far from Mildred's residence. After that, he was sent without bond to the Palm Beach County Jail. He engaged a defense lawyer and denied any role in the crime. This is what the lawyer said in a statement. Mr. Lang strongly disputes the accusations made by the Palm Beach County State's Attorney's Office today, and we intend to vigorously contest the forensic evidence that Mr. Lang is said to have provided. There is nothing in Mr. Lang's record that suggests he has a tendency towards such heinous behavior. Additionally, when we get ready for trial, we will argue that, considering his age and health, he ought to be released to home detention. Richard was 25 years old at the time of the incident, so it's unclear how their paths may have met. Richard has a criminal record. Following his apprehension in Palm Beach County on a weapons possession charge in 2012, his DNA was sent to Cody's. Investigators are certain he is the one responsible, even though he denies any participation. He was a local and a convicted offender, and it's difficult to explain away the discovery of his DNA within her body. After the arrest, this is what Mildred's son had to say. "It has been a while. I am grateful to the cold case team for locating that evil SOB." He mentioned that his mother has experience working with mental health patients at a hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas. She loved spending time with her family, cooking, and sewing. Richard Lang, 62, was found guilty on February 1, 2023, of killing Mildred and abusing her. Restricted to a wheelchair, Lang occasionally dozed off during the trial's plotting moments. He remained silent following the verdict and was led out of the courtroom by bailiffs. This ultimately put an end to a 2-day trial in a 38-year-old unsolved case. On April 4, 2023, Circuit Judge Delia Weiss is set to sentence Lang to prison. Russian flying girl. During the time that he was out walking his dog, a man carried a video camera with him, which allows him to capture this fuzzy video. Every single one of these events takes place in a forest in Russia. The movie begins with the dog as the primary subject of attention. However, the camera quickly shifts to the right and captures a silhouette of a young girl floating in the air in a horizontal position with her upper body raised. According to appearances, the parent of the young child is lying on the ground. Upon closer inspection, it is even possible to make out the creepy child's cold breath as it travels through the icy air to its destination. The passerby is so shocked by the girl's behavior at this point that he even pretends to drop his phone, which causes the camera to shake. This is because the girl is acting in such a horrible manner. It takes a few moments for the camera to become stable again, and it is at this time that we witness the flying girl being caught by her parent. With their hands clasped together, the shocked couple flees. The man who was walking his dog reported that his dog began to chase the two individuals, but the dog was unable to keep up with them. This made the incident much more peculiar than it already was. There is also a stabilized version of this tape, which is causing some who are skeptical to reconsider their beliefs that this video is a scam. A number of the first assertions presented the idea that the girl was suspended in the air in some kind. Due to the fact that the child could not have been hanging from a rope that was suspended above her without a crane being there, it is highly unlikely that something like this could have occurred. Furthermore, it is common knowledge that magicians employ tricks that include horizontal lines in order to make them appear as though they are floating. However, considering the enormous amount of preparation that would be required, this does not appear to be the case here. There is still a lot of mystery around this video, despite the fact that it has been around for quite some time. Some people are of the opinion that this is nothing more than an elaborate hoax, while others are of the opinion that levitation may be accomplished via the practice of meditation and religious rituals. Moving on to the next case. Calico. On the 15th of June, 1989, a woman in Port St. Joe, Florida, exited Route 98 and entered the parking lot of a convenience store. The woman noticed a Polaroid photograph that was laying on the ground with its face down. Nevertheless, when she flipped the photograph over after taking it, she was taken aback to discover a young woman and a youngster having their mouths covered and appearing to be chained. Later on, she stated that the photograph was discovered in a parking spot where a white Toyota cargo vehicle without windows had been parked when she arrived at the store. Roadblocks were set up by the authorities in an attempt to stop the vehicle. However, the individual was never apprehended and was never recognized. In the outset, It was believed that the boy in the photograph was Michael Henley. However, in 1990, the case took a sudden and conclusive turn when the remains of Michael Henley were discovered. They came to the conclusion that he had become disoriented in the woods and had perished as a result of prolonged exposure to the elements. It was speculated that the woman depicted in the photograph was Tara Calico. Tara, who was 19 years old at the time of her disappearance, was a sophomore at the University of New Mexico's Valencia campus when someone reported her missing. Tara was last seen leaving her house on the morning of her abduction, and she was planning to go for a bike ride along Highway 47. The majority of the time, she was accompanied by her mother, Patty. Patty, on the other hand, decided to cease attending her daughter after she received the impression that she was being followed by a driver. According to reports, she suggested that Tara would consider carrying mace, but Tara did not agree with the suggestion. Due to the fact that Tara did not arrive at her house by midday, her mother went looking for her along the typical path, but she was unable to locate her somewhere. Approximately at this time, she made contact with the authorities. Despite the fact that a number of people saw Tara riding her bicycle, she has never been located, and no one has personally observed what is believed to be her kidnapping. This mystery has not yet been resolved. Back to the Polaroid photograph that was discovered. The snapshot was discovered approximately 1,600 miles away from the location where Tara was last seen. Nonetheless, there were a few major similarities between the two locations. It was clear that the young woman in the photograph had the appropriate complexion and hair color. A scar that Tara had sustained as a result of an automobile accident was matched by a discolored patch that was located on the right leg of the young woman. Scotland Yard conducted an examination of the photograph and came to the conclusion that the woman in the picture was Tara. However, a second analysis conducted by the Los Alamos laboratory came to a different conclusion. The snapshot was examined by the FBI, but the results were inconclusive. There is no information available on the identities of the people depicted on the Polaroid. Despite this, it is possible that this photograph serves as a terrifying reminder of a crime that occurred almost 30 years ago and has not been solved to this day. Teleka Patrick. Teleka Patrick, a first-year resident in the medical school program at Western Michigan University, was last seen on December 5th in the Kalamazoo parking lot of her employer, Borges Medical Center. Patrick got a lift to the downtown Radisson Hotel from a male coworker after wrapping up her shift at Borges about 7 o'clock in the evening. She attempted to check into her room while wearing a black sweatshirt and black pants, as seen on camera at the hotel. She eventually left with only $20 and no identity. It was shortly after 8 p.m. when she returned to the medical center to pick up her automobile via the hotel shuttle service. Around 10 o'clock at night, Indiana State Police received a report about an automobile driving strangely, and they discovered her car in a ditch off Interstate 90 in Portage, Indiana. Her wallet and identity were in the car, but the car keys were missing. The car was unharmed, save for a flat tire. When she didn't show up for work the next morning, she was reported missing. On December 12th, the state police brought a bloodhound to the spot, and the dog followed her path back to the motorway before coming to a stop. What led her to go more than 100 miles west without warning her friends and family, and without her cell phone or pocketbook, is the question that needs to be answered. Although nothing noteworthy was found on Patrick's phone records, police claim that the day before she vanished, she may have been irritated by a phone call. Subsequent research revealed a number of videos on YouTube showing Patrick serenading a possible love interest at her Gull Run Apartments residence. In an early November video, Sandra 3000 Cassie shared a meal she had prepared for the guest along with some words. She calls the person she is speaking to in another video baby and love. According to Teleka's mother, she didn't know who her daughter was referencing in the videos and doesn't believe she was in a sexual relationship when she vanished. As Patrick and his ex-husband haven't spoken in 2 years, they are likewise not considered suspects. It appears from the film that she was allegedly stalking a well-known gospel singer, the subject of her irrational romantic videos. After Patrick was accused of stalking her for at least a year, Pastor Marvin Sapp, a Grammy-nominated vocalist, obtained a restraining order against her. She tried to get in touch with his family, sent him several emails and tweets every day, and even picked her college and career depending on where he lived. Sapp purportedly showed 400 pages of letters from Patrick, to which he claims he never replied. Unpredictably, Patrick's second video post is called Surprise. She vanished a few days after that upload in the final video. According to her family, Teleka was not mentally sick. Her body was discovered by a fisherman in Lake Charles, Indiana, on April 6, 2014. Her cause of death was identified as drowning following an autopsy. Even though they were convinced there was foul play, the investigation was closed as an accident. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.